invitation, who is going to be speaking to you about the LPP program. And we are recording this session so that to the extent that we all remember, we're going to try to repeat the questions from the audience so that the question and the response gets picked up by the recording. Si vous voulez poser des questions en français, s'il vous plaît, faites-le, puis on va répondre la question en anglais et en français. And without further ado on that front, I am going to hand it over to Priya. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Stacey, and thank you all for coming. Good morning, and I guess we're a little bit warmer than we were last week. The frigid temperatures hopefully are behind us for a little while, although not a while, one never knows. I did also have the pleasure of going to University of Ottawa for law school, and I'm not sure if I fondly remember or fondly forget some of the winter temperatures. Nevertheless, I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you about the lawyer licensing process, and in particular about the Pathways Pilot Project. I'm going to talk to you for about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to take you through some slides and talk about all of this at a fairly high level to orient you. I'm sure you're all very busy with your studies. You may not have this top of mind, so my job here today is to flag the important issues for you, to answer the questions you may have that are maybe holding you back from making a decision, or might assist you and guide you in making some choices going forward. And then I'm going to open the floor to questions. Literally, I have a few folks here who will maybe assisting me today. I've got Dagmar Jansen, who's one of our senior administrators, coordinators for the Law Society. So Dagmar can help us if there's any questions related to process, applications and that kind of thing. And then I have Anne Levesque here, who is actually the director of the law practice program that is going to be offered here at the University of Ottawa in French. So lots of people here to help us provide the information you may be looking for today. So this visual is sort of a summary, a depiction of the lawyer licensing process, and it includes some of the components that we're not going to get into in a lot of detail today, but I just thought this would be helpful in sort of seeing where everything fits together, how it all fits together. So you're in law school now, so you're at the beginning of the winding path. And as you can see, there are many components, some of which you may be more or less familiar with, including exams, good character requirement, and then of course we have the 2 experiential training paths. We have a articling program, which you I'm sure have heard of and may or may not be participating in, and then we have the new law practice program. And so I'll talk a little bit about the law practice program, both the English and the French options, and I'll also talk to you about some of the changes that are coming to the articling program, because as you may or may not know, there are also some enhancements to that program that are part of the Pathways Pilot Project. So we now have 2 experiential training paths to licensing, the law practice program and the enhanced articling program. And as you know, there are 2 providers that have been selected by the Law Society after a fairly lengthy request for proposal process. Ryerson University was chosen to deliver the English language program, and the University of Ottawa was chosen to deliver the French language program. And I will refer to it as the LPP from time to time. It's a little cumbersome to call it law practice program every time. So overall, both the English and the French law practice program will be 8 months in length. And the first 4 months consist of a training course, and the second 4 months consist of work placements. So overall, 8 months of a time commitment from you, broken up in half, with one being more of a course-based component and the other being a practical placement. So let me tell you a little bit about the English program first, and I'll just say right now that the English and French program are quite similar, but there are some differences. The basic similarity is that both programs are aligned with the required competencies that are contained in the National Competency Profile, which has been approved by 13 law societies. So specifically, the skills and tasks components of that, which are on the Federation of Law Societies website if you are interested. But basically, these are practical activities and skills that a candidate is supposed to engage in order to become a licensed lawyer. The English program that is being offered by Ryerson involves active participation in the training component for 4 months, as I've said. Candidates will be formally assessed in all core competencies, and those will take a variety of forms. Again, this is fairly early in the process. As you know, the providers were announced at the end of November by the Law Society, so we are working with the providers to, and the providers are working very hard to develop their platforms and their curricula. And some of the kinds of activities you'll see in the law practice program on the English side include the types of, activities you would engage in a law firm or in a law practice setting. So producing documents, responding to letters, communications with clients or a simulated client situation, participating in teamwork across perhaps, multiple practice areas. In this particular version of the program, candidates will be organized into law firms with about 4 candidates, and there'll be rotations between those firms. So there might be a practice focus of family law for one module, and then there might be a practice focus on business law. So the idea is to get exposure to all of these different practice areas and the types of practice issues that would come up in those practice areas. The practicing bar will be heavily involved in delivering the program. They'll be acting as instructors as well as mentors, and Ryerson is engaged in recruiting those practitioners right now. The learning format will be a blended one, so there will be online and in-person activities. The online activities will still involve a very robust platform, and I would expect that there will be a lot of synchronous and asynchronous participation, meaning some of it will be done, you can do it on your own, and some of it will involve teamwork with your firm partners or what have you. There will also be approximately 10 days on which you need to be present physically in Toronto, so those will be mandatory in-person days. And Ryerson will, of course, communicate details about all of this in the next few months. And they do have a website if you haven't visited it. If you come to the law, you can either Google it and find it, or the Law Society's licensing process website does have a link to Ryerson's website, which will be updated as well. The idea is to use a problem-based learning model, which is essentially something you may or may not be using now, depending on what courses you're taking. Meaning, maybe some of your more practical courses use scenarios, role plays, simulated professional activities, but it's taking you from the academic to the practical, just as articling would do. And again, the platform that Ryerson is using is very robust. They have over 20 years of experience in both, a co-op module, co-op delivery, as well as this online education that they've been offering in a variety of areas. And as I mentioned, there'll be mentors appointed for firms as well, so that your interactions with the practicing bar will be many, and they'll be involved. You'll be speaking to your practitioner instructors as well as practitioner mentors, so there'll be lots of opportunity for that kind of networking and connecting with practicing lawyers. So in the French law practice program, again, the coverage of the same skills and task competencies outlined in the National Competency Profile, lots of skills-based interactions, heavy involvement of the practicing bar in the form of practitioner instructors and mentors. There will be some form of virtual law firm e-learning platform to simulate the experience in a law firm, so probably some of those interactions will be in person, as you told me, Anne, and some will be online. The French program, because it will be a smaller program, because the numbers will likely be much smaller than the English program, will involve more in-person participation. So it will be designed more around a seminar-based model with the opportunity to have those direct face-to-face contacts, as well as some of the other supports that will be put into place via the e-learning platform. So let's talk a little bit about the work placement component of the law practice program, which again is so we're looking at the second half of the program, 4 months, including 1 week of vacation. So Ryerson has a dedicated work placement office because they've had many years of experience coordinating co-op programs, and so they're quite familiar with that. And as we know, University of Ottawa has a significant presence in the job placements through internships and other such programs. And in the Francophone and Ottawa communities, Anne's told me that she's already received a tremendous response from the practicing bar in regards to work placement opportunities, and that's wonderful to hear. In both cases, training plans will be required to ensure that the work placement is going to provide the competency training and the skills and tasks training that is required by the Law Society. And there will be some format in some form or another of placement assessment. So, your supervisor will have to assess your fulfillment of some of the activities, and you yourself will likely have to assess the placement and your own development in all of this. Both Ryerson and Ottawa University have indicated that they were making best efforts to secure paid placements for the work placement. It's not a guarantee, but at this point, all of the parties involved very much want those placements to be paid in some form or another. So that's the law practice program. I'm going to just take you through a few of the high-level changes to the articling program, which are part of this project. In order to, while the law practice program is being developed, the Law Society is also very much interested in ensuring that the articling program remains a defensible component of the licensing process. And as you all know, articling can be very different depending on the context in which you article. You can article in a law firm, you can article in-house, you can article in a variety of settings. And as the regulator, it's the Law Society's goal to ensure that the program is equipping candidates with basic entry-level competency in core skills and competencies, just like the law practice program, and that we know that that's happening. And at this point, the articling program has been a little bit more variant, and that variance has been allowed for, but we are trying to tighten that program up. So the articling program as it currently stands, and it will still be this way, is 10 months in length, and includes up to 10 vacation days as part of that. You must article with an approved articling principal, and all the forms and documents to put that into place are on our website. And as part of the articling program, you complete an online course. It's called the Professional Responsibility and Practice course, and this is a course that's about 30 hours in length and is designed to cover off topics related to practice management, professional responsibility, client communication, and can be completed by you at a self-paced, modular program over the course of your 10 months. It's about 30 hours in length, and there are readings, exercises, videos, etc. So you can sort of chip away at that over your 10 months. It will end with a final assessment that you would have to do with your articling principal, and they would sit down with you and take you through a series of questions, and it's to promote a discussion. So the enhancements that were basically, if you're interested in reading the report, it is online on the Law Society's website. It came out at the end of October last year. Are in a few areas. One is all articling placements right now do have to fulfill certain requirements. We want to formalize that. So all articling principals will have to submit a training plan. Just like I mentioned, the training plans will be required in the context of the law practice program. The Law Society wants to see that articling principals are turning their mind to the core competencies and putting into place training plans that meet those competencies. So you're not photocopying for 10 months in a boardroom, for instance. So that's one of the things that will be added and introduced into the articling process. A couple of other things, and these are perhaps even more significant, are there will be an online tool developed, and it's under development right now, that will ask candidates and principals to evaluate the placement. So there'll be 45 or so core competencies, and we'll ask the principal to tell us how much exposure you've had to these 45 prioritized competencies that ideally an articling placement would provide. And that will be at some point during your articling term. So that's number 2. And then the final enhancement is a performance appraisal. And this is where you will get assessed by your articling principal on, say, 4 core areas that have been deemed to be the most critical areas in terms of training and entry-level competence. And that is probably happening in a large number of placements. A number of the articling positions out there have a great deal of feedback and evaluation, but not all of them do. And so this is going to be a standardized tool that will involve the articling principal reporting to the Law Society the performance of each candidate on these core competencies. And so, as I said, they'll be administered through an online tool, and the assessment has been developed and validated by several members of the profession who practice in different areas and different contexts. So we wanted to ensure that the tool spoke to core competencies in a way that was meaningful to the variety of contexts in which articling can be completed. They're going to use a thing called behaviorally anchored rating scales, which is basically a method of ensuring consistency of rating and promoting the most reliable results, as opposed to filling in the blank or choosing 1 to 5. They have more language involved. They're more statements of achievement. So psychometrically, they're more valid for that reason. And the formal evaluation, as I said, will be in 4 key categories of competency. And so these are the areas. I'm not going to take you through this in a great amount of detail, but you can see the activities are quite common and would naturally usually be performed in some fashion or another in an articling position. Interviewing a client, drafting an opinion document, representation of a client in either a formal adjudicated setting or something less formal, in an ADR type setting, and some exposure and completion of the law practice management systems and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to, again, get into that in a lot of detail, but those are the assessments, the appraisals that you'll have to, that your articling principal is going to assess you on. And the idea here isn't to say, okay, candidates are going to have to jump through another hoop to get licensed. It's more so to promote consistency, defensibility, and to enhance your articling experience. Because if you're going to be evaluated on these core competencies because they're deemed to be important and critical to practice, then wouldn't it be nice to get some feedback on how you're doing in those areas? Because this is a formative learning experience where you are supposed to be developing. And so we want to see that dialogue happening, and we're going to promote that process through these new enhancements to the articling process. All of the achievements and assessments will be flexible and applicable to the practice environment you're in, so you wouldn't be prejudiced if perhaps you're clerking and you don't have perhaps the direct client contact that you might have in a private law firm setting. There'll be some adjustments to the assessment language, and there'll be options around that you can select. At the end of the 3-year pilot project, the outcomes of all of this will very much inform the evaluation of the program, both the articling program and the law practice program, and inform what happens next. So if you like being part of something new and something exciting, you're certainly going to do that by virtue of the year you're entering the licensing process. So I will just briefly talk about, we've received information from the Law Society about how it all fits together. The process involves successful completion of the 2 licensing exams, the barrister exam and the solicitor exam, completion of the law practice program or the articling program to fulfill your experiential training requirement, and of course the administration means the application, all the documents you have to fill, and your call to the bar fees. And all told, this is the final fee, on account of a contribution by the profession, $1 million, and that's the same fee that is applied to everyone, regardless of whether they are in the law practice program or the articling program. And so there are many ways to reach us. You have your iLaws account, which you should be checking regularly. And if you haven't checked it this week, please go in and check it, because there's information there. Most importantly, information about the selection you need to make between the law practice program and the articling program. And we'd like to hear from you by this Friday, if possible. And of course, all these other ways to reach us, and the website is a great source of information as it's updated regularly. In terms of the January 17th deadline, I'm just going to speak to that more specifically. A number of you may not know what you're going to do, and you may still be deciding. And so what we've asked you to do is to make a selection that indicates that, and there's a selection for have not yet secured an articling position, I'm not registering for the law practice program. If nothing else, make that selection if you don't know which stream you're going to go in. Don't leave it blank. Don't not select something. it's really important because you're gonna also get other information about the licensing process, because maybe this one component isn't settled for you, but there's the exams and all the other things, you wanna get your materials in time, and so we need to hear from you. If your situation changes, you can update the information in our system, and that will continue, it'll roll forward. So if you select a law practice program today and you decide to article, then you just go in and you change it, and we will ensure that you get the appropriate information. But you need to do that, you need to tell us, so that you get the information in a timely manner. And similarly, if it goes the other way and you decide to switch from articling to law practice program, you have some time to do that. While specific deadlines are not posted, we expect, and we will put this in writing at some point, that you will be able to opt into the law practice program until around the first week of the program, in or around that time. There will be a cutoff date, after which you cannot opt into the law practice program for September 2014, and you would have to wait the following year or proceed with articling. So just bear those dates in mind. There's still a bit of time, but if you can please get back to us on your selection at this point in time, based on your current situation, by the 17th, that would be tremendous. That's all I had in terms of my formal presentation. I'm sure you have questions, and I'm happy to take those and answer them the best I can based on where we are in the process right now. Does anyone have any? Yes?
I can start us off. I'm curious if students sign up for the licensing process, and let's say they don't do the articling program in their first year, or let's say they do the articling program, but it's an international article. Let's say it doesn't end up satisfying the legal criteria the law society has put in place. Are they then able to sign up for the LPP either second or third year of the licensing process?
Good question. So you have a total of 3 years from when you enter the licensing process to complete all components of the licensing process. So that includes the exams, the experiential training component. So yes, you'd be able to opt in the second year because it's going to go for 3 years, provided you're within your 3-year time frame. The other thing is there are things called international articles that are approved by the Law Society, and so if you're interested in doing something like that and you have potential placement, you should contact us, and there's actually documentation online that specifies what's required for international articles. Yeah,
Can I follow up on that?
sure, I'll try and answer your question.
That's great. No, so, and I don't want to go too far offline, perhaps it's better to have this conversation offline, but with regards to international articles in particular, the Law Society has a number of legal criteria that are there, that are required for all articles.
Right.
And it says for international articles that a majority of those criteria should be satisfied.
Yeah.
Last year when the Law Society came in, I asked for a bit of clarity in terms of what does the majority mean, but if it be more than half, or do you have examples perhaps of past international articles that have satisfied the articling requirements, and I didn't get much receptivity even offline. Perhaps that's something you can touch on, or perhaps there's a resource you can give. And I do ask as well because, you know, I'm sure you're aware, the University of Ottawa has a very robust international law program. There's a lot of students that are going to be pursuing that option.
Well, I mean, that's tremendous, and if that's something that you're interested in doing, and there's a very rich possibilities there, right, in terms of really interesting placements and dynamic work experience. So I don't have the number in terms of majority, and I don't have a document I can share with you at this time, but what I would say is to speak to us again. And so I think that, I'm sorry you didn't get the answers that you needed last year, but if you were to perhaps pick up the phone and speak to one of the people in our office, or send a note to our email, we can make sure that question's answered a little more. Dagmar actually checks the email, so she's heard the question now. And I think if what you're looking for is more guidance, you might need to have a conversation with one of us and maybe say, okay, here's what I'm gonna be doing.
Yeah.
Because these are new competencies for you. I'm sure you're not used to necessarily working with the competencies, you know what you'll be doing, and we can do the sort of cross-reference and say, yes, that would probably fit or not. If you have something like that you can give us, that would be great. Yes?
In terms of the second half of the LPP program, you
Yes.
mentioned that there's going to be like some sort of placements.
Yes.
I think like back when, before we found out that it was going to be at Ryerson and everything, there was some talk about like those types of placements being specifically in access to justice sort of fields, but maybe elaborate or maybe give examples of what kind of work environments
Yeah,
that
and
have come forward so far.
Yeah, and I'll ask Anne to jump in here as well. So, I mean, from a preliminary sort of point of view, we've had to, I mean, the request for proposal process was a public, one, and one of the requirements was that the providers indicate to us that they had a certain number of placements and evidence of those placements lined up. And I would say that they are going to be in areas that perhaps would not necessarily support an articling placement because perhaps they're underfunded or the opportunities are different, but many placements will likely end up in settings such as perhaps an in-house setting or perhaps even a social service setting, an alternative legal setting. I can't get more specific than that because it is up to Ryerson and not you to secure those placements. That's the responsibility. And do you have any examples or anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I can tell you that when we're approaching potential employers, our strategy is to go to people who possibly otherwise couldn't afford or wouldn't have the workload to take on someone for 10 months. So in-house counsel, unions, or small firms. I can tell you I work at a small firm, and budgeting to have someone for 10 months and to give them a steady flow of work for 10 months is difficult if you're working with 3 lawyers. But if you're, if we're saying could you guarantee someone work for 4 months, it's a lot more flexible, and the feedback I'm getting from lawyers from small firms is they really like the idea. So yeah, we're looking at clinics, unions, in-house counsel. I would encourage you, I can't speak for Ryerson, but for the Francophone students, if you have any preferences or areas of interest, you can come and see me, and I'll do my best to use my personal contacts and hit up, employers that meet those your areas of interest. We're going to try to as much as possible to find a good fit.
Okay, over here.
Maybe just as a follow-up to
Yeah.
that point, one issue that's come up for me, and I know a lot of the other third years who are here, is nameless lawyers that I've spoken to have said, I don't think I could afford an articling student, but if you wanted to come on for free, I'm sure we could work something out. And I'm wondering if the Law Society has a position with respect to unpaid articles.
Okay, so our position is that unpaid articles do exist, and we don't decline them automatically because they're unpaid. Our main focus with any articling position is, does it fulfill the competencies that are required of an article placement? If a candidate chooses to article on an unpaid basis, that is up to the candidate. Our main thing is the person an approved? Do they qualify to be an approved articling principal? Will the position fulfill the requirements? That is the case. So, that is a very personal decision, and it has a lot to do with your personal situation.
Well, by allowing that sort of a process to exist, isn't that therefore a disincentive to certain lawyers, especially in a small setting, to pay, knowing that if people are getting close to the deadline and they want to find an articling position, that maybe I don't have to pay them a salary?
I mean, it's a valid point. From a policy point of view, up till very recently, the Law Society was endeavoring to increase the number of articling positions and had to relax its policies to do so. There were fewer documents involved. There was one-time articling principal approval, all these things, and including that was, international, national articles, all these things that perhaps wouldn't have been commonplace 10, 20 years ago. But as the pressure mounted and as we started to see a lack of supply positions to keep up with the demand, those policies were discussed at length by, the ventures, and they've decided that, certain things would be permissible. The disincentive piece, I'd say now in the light of the law practice program that there's an alternative, I'd say, those policies could change. Can we force articling principals to pay their candidates? No. But if there's a viable alternative that does pay, then really the pressure would come from the candidates not choosing those positions and perhaps saying, well, I'd rather go with something that I know will be paid and that'll be offered through one of the law practice program providers. And I know I'll get that practical work training, I'll get that exposure. It'll be in the combination, it'll combine with the training course, but I'm going to choose to do that. We can't really twist the profession's arm that much to say you're not allowed to do that. I don't think they're that common because of the reality of someone who's just graduated from law school and needing to have an income. I did want to mention though financial assistance before we leave the topic, just because that's relevant to this. So the Law Society does have a few financial assistance programs. The first is the repayable allowance program, which is based on need, which is, you apply to us and we will, exactly in that situation, an unpaid articling position would be one of those types of situations where we would look at that and you'd be a candidate for that kind of program. And then we also offer equal billing programs for those who want to break up their licensing process fees across the 10 months or the 5 months as the case will be. And if you read the November convocation report, which I seriously doubt you did because you're busy doing other things, the Law Society has noted that there's a potential for financial hardship here because of the uncertainty around the work placements, and is very acutely aware of it and has left the door open to revisiting that issue if in a few months we see that is very much the case. If the work placements don't turn out to be paid as much as we hope, I still think that is very likely going to happen. But if that is the case, the Law Society is open to considering bursaries of some kind, and I can't say that's going to happen for sure. It is in the report, and so it's something that the Law Society will be looking at as we move through this first year of the law practice program.
If I could just ask one follow-up to that,
Yeah.
just with regards to the placements that would be taking place with the LPP. You talked about different areas of practice. Is there any regards with different areas to location? So if you're studying out of Ottawa or Toronto or Windsor, do you have flexibility as to where you end up with your placement?
Okay, I can comment on a high level from what I know from Ryerson and can add on the University of Ottawa side. So there will likely be placements outside of the city centres where the law practice programs are situated, and that can involve could involve locations where you don't necessarily live. There will be some kind of matching process where upfront candidates will be asked about parameters of ideally what is the practice area you're interested in, what is the best fit, what are the locations you'd be willing to travel to, because some people have that flexibility and would love to take that placement out in Timmins or elsewhere to get a really interesting experience and have the ability to do that, and others would not. And I think that the providers are going to have some method for doing that assessment up front with you, and should you choose the law practice program, and then they would go from there. So it definitely will not be confined to Ottawa City Centre and GTA. Is that fair to say?
So a bit about similarly to when you're looking for articling positions, there's trade-offs, and we're going to be doing a matching system that takes into account your preferences with regards to relocation, areas of interest, types of law, and then we'll try to take those factors into account when we're placing. But I mean, if the perfect job comes up and it's in Timmins or Thunder Bay, or we're going to try to do our best to take into account your best case scenario and find the right match for you.
There was a question back here, yes.
Yeah, sort of related question. Usually, students are responsible for starting to pay back their student loans about 6 months after graduating. If you're participating in this program, do you have to pay back your student loans?
Very good question. Ann and I just talked about this actually, and I know we're in discussions with Ryerson about the OSAP. What's the OSAP? What are the terms you're going to do regarding OSAP? And so at this point, we are looking into it. The providers are going to be looking into it in terms of the status of the program, in terms of loan repayment. I assume that will be that's going to be something that's going to be done quite quickly because that's a question that's come up. It's our hope that it would qualify for deferral of payment because it's a form of study, but we don't know the answer yet, and so we will let you know, and as soon as the information is available, we'll provide it to you. There's a question over here.
Yeah, I was just kind of following up on the theme of what's going on. So in terms of the work placements, they're going to be something that's sort of we get placed at. It's not like we have to, apply for these positions in sort of like an extended OCI situation. And a second question to that is, I'm wondering what will happen if, let's say, there's more students in this LPP program than there are placements.
Okay, so I'm going to answer the question about your second half of your question first, because the issue around sufficient placements for candidates has come up at other presentations I've done. And so, I mean, both providers are working very much in tandem with the practicing bar to ensure that there are sufficient placements. This initiative is going to be successful if the profession supports it, and we're seeing that. We're seeing alliances being made here in Ottawa between Ottawa U and the practicing bar that already exist, that are basically just being built upon. We're seeing those same alliances happening in Toronto with Ryerson and the Ontario Bar Association, and there has been a really tremendous feedback to the whole work placement idea. So we're hoping that there will be sufficient placements. The providers are absolutely working very hard to ensure that. But let's be honest, okay? If suddenly there are 600 candidates in this law practice program and there aren't 600 placements, we would have a problem. So I would say to you, what would happen is it would come back to the law societies, policymakers, and something would be done. And if that turned into a funding of placements or a phone call marathon, those things would not be left to the candidates for the candidates to worry about. The burden would be shared by the regulator and the profession at large. So at this point, I think we're also in very regular contact with providers. We get monthly reports from the providers, so the law study is keenly aware that that's a potential. So that's one reason why we've made it such that we will receive very regular reports from the providers on their progress. In terms of applying versus matching, Anne, did you have any comments on that?
Well, we need to satisfy the employer that the fit is right, so we'll need you to do some kind of resume, and we'll help you take those steps to but you won't be applying for jobs. It's a matching process. So I don't anticipate there'll be interviews, but it's a matching process that we'll assist you with in the process.
Oh, over here, yeah.
One of the advantages I see to the articling program over the LPP is somewhat, I guess, some ability for students to sort of choose an area of interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, knowing what those modules will be really important in making a decision between one stream or the other. So do you have any idea when we might have some idea of what the content of the course would be?
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, the modules are in the training course. So the modules are sort of set up for the training portion of the course, and you should expect that they're going to cover, all the core areas of law in some form or another: civil litigation, business, real estate, states and trusts, the 7 core areas of law, public law, etc. But the work placements, will depend. It depends on, there will probably be some very niche work placements that come up, and there'll probably be some more generic ones. It depends on, the setting. Just like with articling, you can article and literally only do one area of law, IP law, for 10 months. And if you want to be an IP lawyer, great. If you don't want to be an IP lawyer, but that's the job you ended up with, and you'd wonder, well, how would I end up with that job? Things happen. I mean, so you may or may not have that flexibility in articling. I would say I kind of disagree with you there. I think that the idea here is you might have a little more choice, and you might get to veer outside the box a little bit in the law practice program and go into an area that you'd say, oh, I wish I could article in this area, but it's just not something that comes up a lot. But in the law practice program, the alternatives will probably be more of a reality for you. So
I guess my question is more specific to the modules.
to the module. Okay, well, the modules, the contents, yeah, you can.
So there are 7 modules in the English program. The French program will have 8. We're looking at wills and estates, administrative law, family law, commercial law, litigation, and it's like a litigation boot camp, criminal, what am I forgetting?
Real estate?
Real estate. So like the core areas. So, I mean, what this gives you is guaranteed exposure to the main areas of law where most lawyers are needed. Not a lot of articling positions can give you that, right? You're guaranteed to develop all the main skills in the key areas of law, and guaranteed to get feedback on those areas. And we've already hired all our practitioners who will be teaching in the program, and we went through a rigorous selection process in consultation with the professors of the French Common Law program, the IDFO, and judges. So we wanted to select the lawyers with expertise and the best reputation. So those are the people you'll be learning from, and getting feedback on your work. When you're articling, you're being paid to help lawyers. Here, we're paying the lawyers to help you. So the relationship changes a bit, and you're guaranteed to get feedback on everything you get, and we're trying to get judges involved in giving feedback in oral submissions and written work. So, I mean, we're guaranteeing you this experience and this exposure in all of the main areas of law with the experts in those areas.
Yeah, at the back.
Just, I guess a question, I'm not sure if you would have the answer to this, but in terms of how the LPP program is structured, model that was used maybe in another jurisdiction as sort of the?
That's a good question. You're aware that in Australia they've done a practicing law training program or institute or course, and it's called PLTC. You might have heard of it. We are not. Both providers are deriving their own unique programs, creating them from scratch based on the competency framework, and that's very intentional. Both providers demonstrated expertise in that area, and we decided not. The Law Society decided very early on not to go with an existing model. So, yep.
Is the module section of the program graded or on a pass-fail basis?
I can just speak to Ryerson, and then I'm going to hand it over to him to speak to Dot or you. At this point, the rubrics and sort of cut scores for all this stuff are not determined specifically. They are probably going to be a combination of a number of things in terms of qualitative feedback. Probably some scales and probably some pass-fail. I would say that you could expect a mix.
Yeah, so we're looking at, again, really recreating what the experience in private practice, and everyone makes mistakes. And what happens is you have to learn how to foresee possible mistakes and how to fix them. So there will be a mix of graded exercises where you're getting feedback from your colleagues and members of the bar on your work. But what we're looking at doing for the last week is taking case studies of examples that were made in the course and studying together how to fix them. So that can mean calling Law Pro and preparing for a lawsuit, or it can mean filing a motion to a court and amending your pleadings. That's that we really want to recreate the experience, the learning experience that you would get in an articling position. And it's not, when you're in an articling position, you're not under the constant stress of being passed or failed, or you're under the stress of producing, and that's what we want you to do. We want you to learn from your mistakes. I just want to speak, I know that this is very English heavy. I'm really sorry. We have our presentation on the French program exclusively. Ce sera le 12 février de midi à 1h. Vous pouvez visiter le site web du programme de pratique de droit en français à l'Université d'Ottawa. Et ce sera vraiment ciblé sur le programme français. Et j'ai hâte de vous en parler. Si vous avez des questions sur le programme français, vous pouvez venir me parler directement. Je vais vous donner mes coordonnées.
C'est ça, ça veut dire le 8e module, c'est the additional module.
Oh, so the last module that we're doing a module on how to run and manage a firm. So how to docket your time, how to decide what you can bill to a client, how you justify your billings to clients, how you hire a paralegal, what can you delegate to a paralegal. It's being taught by a very senior lawyer in town who's really well respected, but has just gone on his own and is a managing partner of a new firm. So he'll be conveying that experience, and those are the skills, the business side of the law that employers, especially in small firms, are looking for. People who understand the practice aspect of the firm, how to bill a client, how to justify your billings. Those are skills that we want to convey. How to network. How to build a practice, how to get referrals, things like that.
Yes,
for bilingual students, are they bound to the Toronto or the Ottawa LLP or LPP based on the language in which they took their common law degree?
no, you can choose to do the licensing process in the language that you would like to, so you don't have to continue with the language.
And then the placements in for example, the French program, would it be possible to move into a placement in the English program, or when you're in one, I mean, it goes to the English program as well. If you're in the English first 4 months, are you then able to do a placement in the French program? Or not?
So I'll just speak to that. So for the French program, if you've studied law in French, there's no problem. If you studied law in English, there's going to be some kind of exam just to make sure that you can speak in French, because you will be doing written work in French. In terms of the placements, there aren't a lot of positions in Ontario where you're working exclusively in French. So, I'm approaching Francophone lawyers, but the reality is we have to be bilingual in Ontario practice law if you're a Francophone. So, if French isn't your mother tongue, but you feel comfortable writing and speaking in French, you know, we can talk about the admissibility requirement for the French exam, and then in terms of placements, I mean, you'll be working either, you know, with some French or like, you know, mostly English setting, but, you know, I'm approaching francophone firms and workplaces.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Is that a question about the enhancements that you speak of the articling program?
Yes.
Does that affect, because I know that there's opportunities to do like split articles and concurrent articles and things like that. Is there any effects to that based on these new enhancements that you're talking about?
So any articling position that a candidate were to indicate for the next licensing cycle will be, you know, basically subject to enhancements, meaning that, you know, we want candidates who are placed in any kind of articling position to be and those principals to be participating in this. So there might be there might be some adjustments that need to be made if you've got more than one articling principal, or if you're splitting it, or that kind of thing. But we would work with your articling principal and with you on that to make sure that you're still getting the benefit of all the enhancements. Anything else? So we know that things come to mind after the session, and we know that they will come to mind as you move through the process. You know how to reach us here. Stacy also has my contact information, and of course Anne. So if you feel that you want to ask something quite specific offline, and you want to just have a little bit of our time to do that, we're happy to answer your questions as you go through the process. I have to say I'm excited for you. I think it's a really interesting time to be becoming a lawyer, to be going through this process. There's more opportunity than ever before. I think they will be very interesting. These programs are going to be very interesting, and I wish you all the best in the rest of your studies, and of course in your licensing process. I look forward to seeing you across the stage, handing you your call to the bar certificate, and seeing your name on the rolls of the Law Society. So all the best to you, and please don't hesitate to let us know if you have any questions.
So please join me in thanking all of our guests for being here today.
I think they know this. And my point is, now it's like, well, you know, we're going to have a here's my thing, like, what if you say you're going to do that? I don't stay on It's really bothering me. How you doing, my friend? What do you say? I never heard that. Apparently they haven't taken it interested yet. And so they're gonna make calls in like a month or two and find out most of the people I'll tell you.
Just have a quick question. I'm not a candidate, so I take up time. Oui, c'est Maria, enchantée. Ben moi je travaille en droit international. Mais donc il y a des cabinets qui font ce genre de travail. Je sais pas, je peux pas te garantir. Mais continuons de parler de j'aime plus placer les mais c'est ça. Moi, je dis, on peut contacter dans le
mais oui, on a ouvert des cabinets, des petits cabinets je fais des choses. Moi, je suis dans un cabinet. Hi.
My name is Sibashi.
Ça, c'est ce que j'ai voulu faire. Mais
I'm also and I've always gotten very, very interested.
ouais, mais on devrait continuer à faire des choses, parce que c'est pas aussi des choses. C'est la troisième année. C'est bientôt. Donc, fais-tu droit international, social,
When I look at all that stuff on criteria, it's a range of you know, I start wondering and it's been tough to read because this organization that I compete I'm applying to these
Okay. Depends what the question is. The what? The cost, yeah. Well, everyone pays that. That's what it costs to just do the licensing process. So if you're whether you article or you do the program, it's $4,700.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like it doesn't really matter which one you do.
Exactly.
So in this case, it's like
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And now the effort that
Well, that's what we're looking into. We're going to try. Right now, the regs say that you have to be an accredited university institution. Our program is being offered by AutoLink, but it's not an included on our program. So we're going to try to do our best to, like right now, the answer is no, actually. But it's really, 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 really important for me, and I can tell you, like, it's all possible.
yeah, so I mean, at this point, like, so I know what
Well, tell us. Like, I haven't read that, but I think you need to. Yeah, and yes, and just, I think that's what I'm doing. Like, I'm not even able to yeah, no, well, yeah, well, you need yeah.
And one thing, I went to the course. Do you think it's going to be possible for me to like so you can do anything else? But with this program, will I be able to get
I don't think so. Well, I'm not the French program. I don't know about Ryerson. You can contact them, but it's going to be, yeah. And, well, you know, it's like articles, and you have to think it's like the more you're working, the more you're learning. Yeah. But really,
yeah, I wasn't curious about it. Like, I'm not afraid of it.
no, that's okay. Well, I understand the analysis, but I would encourage you, and if you have any colleagues, an undergrad, maybe another 3 years.
Yeah, all I have is like
So you need to convince.
that's right, so I'm going to ask about it. Thank you so much.
I don't even know how to stop this.
I know about summary sections. Generally don't do it unless you're sure you're going
If you're signing up for the next program, you just
Well, I think we should register now, and they're going to say, yeah, it's the first step, regardless of of what alternatives you should, when you should register for the process, and the first step is the bar exam, and then, but they're gonna ask you to select one or the other. Yeah.
What about like
Okay, so that's another part of the session community council. Staff kind of administrators sees the program, they see the program, see the post-secondary programs, they see the select very
Yeah, we just moved it, so c'était pas proche pendant toute
Arrête d'enregistrer.